Tom Bauer opens the door with one brutal truth, a truth that changes how this entire story looks. According to him, Prince Harry's long battle with drugs didn't happen in a vacuum. And more than that, Meghan Markle's influence may not have just existed alongside that struggle. Allegedly, it may have deepened it even worse. She may have learned how to steer that fog to her own advantage. Bauer paints a picture far darker than most people ever expected. This isn't a prince who tried drugs once or twice as a reckless teenager. What he describes is a man locked into dependence for decades. And alongside him, a woman whose influence allegedly threads through every major decision, every reframed memory, and every public meltdown that followed. This isn't gossip, it's about patterns, it's about power, and it's about a prince who, if this account is accurate, may never have truly stood a chance tonight. We step inside that story. Picture this. You're just 13 years old, barely old enough to understand the world, let alone yourself. And yet, you're already forming a habit that will quietly follow you for the next several decades. According to those familiar with Harry's early years, that's where his story really begins. Sources claim Harry's relationship with drugs didn't suddenly appear in adulthood. It didn't arrive out of nowhere. Instead, it crept in. Early, growing slowly like a shadow that stretches longer and darker with age. What began as early exposure eventually became something far more serious, something Tom Bauer doesn't describe as youthful experimentation, but as a 25-year struggle with addiction. Let that sink in. 25 years. If that timeline is accurate, it means Prince Harry has spent more of his life under the influence than without it. And as the years passed, that shadow didn't fade, it expanded it. It shaped how he handled pressure, relationships, and even his own memories, because when drugs are part of your life for that long, they don't stay in the background, they change the lens, they alter perception, they rewrite reality. And that's exactly why this revelation matters. This isn't really a story about drugs, it's a story about what those drugs helped shape about the man Harry would later become: emotionally exposed, easily influenced, constantly searching for direction. And it's into that vulnerability that Meghan Markle enters the picture. But before we get there, we need to understand just how thick that fog already was. Fast forward to Montecito blue California skies, massive estates, tall gates designed to shut the outside world out. Inside one of those homes, according to Tom Bauer's claims, the smoke didn't disappear with age. If anything, it settled in. Even deeper sources allege that Harry continues to smoke weed almost every single day, even now, and daily use isn't harmless background noise. It slows your thinking, it softens your memory, it stretches small worries into lingering fears, it creates a quiet, invisible barrier between you and the people, trying to pull you back to reality. And when those fears tip into paranoia, every shadow starts to feel dangerous inside. That Montecito housed, the fog allegedly became its own environment, a second atmosphere, one that wrapped itself around Harry's thoughts like a blanket he couldn't shake off. Now, add something even more dangerous when someone is already emotionally fragile, already unsure of who they are or where they belong. Daily drug use doesn't just calm them, it anchors them, it ties them to habits, to anxieties, and sometimes to the people closest to them. According to Bauer, this constant haze didn't just dull Harry's memory, it distorted his judgment, it influenced his reactions, it shaped his decisions, and it blurred his sense of what was real and what wasn't. And that leads us to one of the most disturbing revelations of all. If Harry was living inside a fog, the real question is this: who was guiding him through it long before Meghan entered his life? Before Montecito, before the interviews, the documentaries, and the book deals, Harry was already carrying something most people never fully understood about him. Sources claim that when Harry sat his Sandhurst entrance exam, the test designed to measure readiness for military leadership, his writing ability tested at the level of a 13-year-old. He was 20 at the time. That detail isn't an insult. Intelligence shows up in many different forms, but it does help explain a much larger vulnerability. Harry has long struggled to express himself clearly, to work through complex ideas, to recognize manipulation while it's happening. And because of that, the words we read today, the explosive chapters in Spare, the neatly arranged emotions, the carefully structured memories, do not reflect his natural voice. They were built, crafted, shaped. Sources insist the memoir is the work of a ghostwriter stitching together fragmented memories, emotional confusion, outside influence, and the dramatic tone required to sell a bestseller without journals, detailed notes, or reliable personal records, Harry relied almost entirely on what he was told, what he half remembered through years of haze, and what the ghostwriter could reconstruct. His life story became a patchwork narrative assembled from second-hand memories and borrowed language. And this is where the real tragedy begins. A man with an unreliable memory, clouded judgment, and a constant drug fog became the perfect vessel for someone else's story, someone who knew how to steer him, someone who understood influence, someone who knew exactly how to guide him through the fog. Someone who entered his life with precision. When people talk about power, they picture crowns guards and palaces, but real power doesn't look like that. Real power slips quietly into someone's mind and settles there. It doesn't need authority, it doesn't need force, it only needs influence, timing, and the right person standing next to someone who doesn't know how to protect himself. According to sources familiar with the situation, that is exactly what Meghan Markle became to Prince Harry, not just a partner, but a guiding force, stepping into the life of a man already softened by years of emotional confusion and drug dependence. Harry, already struggling with clarity, entered a relationship with someone who allegedly understood how to steer emotions, shape narratives, and quietly shut out anyone who challenged her version of events. And according to multiple accounts, Meghan didn't simply offer comfort or support. She offered direction. Sources claim she allegedly fed Harry stories, interpretations, and selective information that encouraged him to doubt everyone except her. People who once grounded him suddenly appeared dangerous. Family members became threats. Disagreement turned into betrayal. And as Harry slipped deeper into emotional reasoning, where feelings replaced logic, he stopped questioning the stories being placed in front of him. Because once someone controls your perspective, they control everything. Your choices, your reactions, your fears, your anger. Slowly, Harry's voice, already weakened by years of fog, was replaced by Meghan's the interviews, the confrontations, the public accusations. All of them carried the tone of someone convinced they were on a righteous mission, even as much of the world saw something very different. But to truly understand Meghan's influence, we have to look not at Harry's past, but at hers. Every story has an origin, and according to investigators, authors, and those close to the situation, Meghan Markle's begins in a home marked by chaos, instability, and emotional volatility. Sources claim both of her parents displayed strong narcissistic traits. This isn't name-calling, it's psychology. When a child grows up in a household where control, validation, and emotional dominance define the adults, that child doesn't grow up in calm waters. She grows up navigating shifting moods, inconsistent affection, and constant emotional performances just to feel secure. According to those who observed her early life, Meghan's childhood lacked predictability. Her mother's behaviour was unstable. Her father, attempting to compensate, allegedly overindulged her, showering her with praise gifts, and the idea that she deserved special treatment long before she ever married into royalty. That combination, chaos on one side and overcompensation on the other, creates what psychologists describe as a lack of control environment. A place where a child learns one lesson early: if I don't control everything, everything falls apart. And from that mindset grows something powerful, a belief that the world must bend or break, that emotions are tools that people must be managed, shaped, and guided. From an environment like that, a narcissist isn't born as a villain. They're formed as a survivor, someone shaped by instability, not cruelty. But Meghan's story turns darker, because while emotional chaos molded her personality, something far more severe helped define her future. Her mother disappeared. Every child remembers the moment their world stops making sense. For Meghan, that moment arrived when her mother, Doria Ragland, vanished from her life for 10 long years. 10 years of silence, 10 years without answers. 10 years of missing pieces that were never explained. According to claims cited in Tom Bower's research, Doria wasn't just unstable, she was allegedly involved in heavy drug use and, at one point, drug dealing. Sources say this lifestyle wasn't hidden and that it contributed directly to the collapse of her marriage to Thomas Markle, leaving their daughter trapped between two realities she was far too young to understand. But the most chilling detail isn't the chaos, it's the disappearance itself. Why did Doria vanish for an entire decade? Why is there no clear public record explaining where she went? Why does every attempt to locate official documentation lead nowhere? According to sources, there are several theories, none confirmed, all deeply unsettling. One possibility is prison time, with records sealed. Another is intervention by Child Protection Services. Another suggests she may have become a cooperating witness in a drug case. Yet another claims she was relocated for safety due to involvement with dangerous individuals. No one outside a very small circle knows the truth. But one thing is certain. A mother does not disappear for 10 years unless something serious has happened, and when she returned, the damage was already done. The distance between mother and daughter had hardened a missing mother, a childhood built on instability, a father desperately trying to compensate, and a daughter growing up with an early sharpened understanding of control, silence, and emotional leverage. This is the world Meghan came from. This is the soil where her personality took root, and this is the foundation she carried into her marriage with Harry. A marriage where one partner was already struggling to stay afloat, and the other already knew how to guide a drowning man, because people don't become lost overnight. It happens slowly, piece by piece, step by step, fog by fog. According to experts familiar with Harry's emotional condition, that is exactly what happened to him. He didn't wake up paranoid. He didn't wake up angry. He didn't wake up ready to cut himself off from his own family. He was guided there gently, gradually, almost imperceptibly. Sources say Harry now lives inside what psychologists call a shared fantasy, a closed world, where two people share the same story, amplify the same fears, and reinforce the same version of reality. It's powerful, it's intoxicating, and someone already weakened by addiction, it feels like absolute truth. That's what makes Harry's situation so tragic. He no longer sees the consequences of his actions. He no longer recognizes the damage being done. He no longer questions the narratives he repeats. In his mind, he is certain, clear, correct. But certainty is not clarity. Certainty is what happens when questions stop being asked. And that is what both kinds of fog, psychological and chemical, have taken from him. Not his freedom, his awareness, and when awareness is gone, anything becomes possible, which brings us to the final chapter. Not a chapter about the past, but about the storm forming ahead. Because every story reaches a point where the truth becomes impossible to ignore, where the smoke thins just enough for us to see what's coming next. Picture Montecito, the sun dipping behind the hills, glass walls glowing gold as evening settles in a mansion filled with silent secrets, and the lingering haze of a man who no longer recognizes the world beyond his own window. Inside sits Prince Harry, once the bearer of national hope, now carrying something far heavier, the weight of years he can't undo. Years shaped by addiction, years shaped by influence, years shaped by the woman who entered his life at its most fragile point. Beside him is Meghan Markle, a woman formed by her own shadows, a childhood marked by instability, a decade without her mother, a life that taught her the value of control long before she ever met a prince who didn't know how to defend himself from it. Together, they didn't build a partnership, they built a house of smoke, a place where truth bends, memories blur, and every decision drifts somewhere between fear and fantasy. And now that house is starting to shake, because smoke can't support weight forever. As more revelations surface, as questions multiply, and as cracks spread across their carefully managed image, one reality becomes impossible to ignore. This story isn't ending, it's unraveling layer by layer, fog by fog, and somewhere inside that Montecito home, a prince sits in silence, unaware of how close he may be to losing the last thing he has left, the clarity to save himself. Because here's the final truth: smoke never hides forever. When a house is built on fog, the wind always comes, and when it does, the world will finally see what was hidden all along.